Hi friends, welcome back to Storytime with the Chittenango Landing Canal Boat Museum. I'm Miss Lindsay, and today we will be continuing with our story, Minnie the Mule and the Erie Canal. Chapter 5, Score 1 for Minnie. Minnie walked carefully up the ramp from the towpath late that afternoon. Jack stood at the rail, ready to lead her down the long ramp into the bow stable, as Sarah gently pushed on her rear quarters to stop her from slipping back. As always, Minnie thought, this is not my favorite thing to do. I will be glad to get into my stable safely. There, home again. She drew a long breath of relief and watched Captain Fairweather back her sister out of her stall. See you later, girls. Behave yourselves, Maud whinnied as she took her turn climbing the long ramp to the deck. Captain Dan would walk with her as they moved towards the city of Fonda, where another lock awaited them. Where is Mike? I hope he sleeps until he has to walk again. He didn't let me finish my meal. I am hungry. Minnie looked over at Molly as their sister left the stable. No such luck. He is coming out of his room right now. Molly turned her head to look back as Mike stumbled out of his room that was just a few feet behind them. He paid no attention to them as he went to the hooks where the feed bags hung and reached into the one Minnie had used. He looked around nervously as he pulled the canvas bag out and walked over to the big locker where he kept his clothes. It was directly in back of Molly's stall. Minnie watched as he stuffed the bag down under the contents that were already there. He slammed the door and stood up, lurching unsteadily into Molly. She brayed loudly in alarm, and he grabbed a leather strap off the wall to strike her viciously across the rump. You stop that! Minnie brayed as she struck out with her hind hoof and caught him on the seat of his pants. He swung around and angrily used the strap on Minnie as Sarah came running down the ramp. I am going to tell my father. He told you not to hit the mules. Sarah's eyes sparked with anger. You keep your trap shut. Mike reached out to grab her, but she was too quick for him. She spun around and bounded up the ramp. Mike quickly hung the strap back on the wall before the captain came down with his daughter. What is going on? Sarah said you just hit Minnie. He faced Mike with his hands on his hips, and his blue eyes were just as angry as Sarah's. She kicked me. What was I supposed to do, just stand there and take it? Mike was defiant. You must have done something to her, or she would not do that. Sarah glared at him. Good for you. Tell the captain to fire him. He is a bad man. Minnie snorted, and Molly nervously pawed the straw in her stall. She was scared of Mike. I have warned you repeatedly, Mike. If you continue to abuse these animals, I will drop you at the next port. Captain Fairweather's voice was quiet, but he meant what he said. Okay, but this kid of yours is nothing but a troublemaker. Tell her to stay out of my way. Mike's voice was surly. Give Minnie and Molly a good feed, Sarah. Her father ignored Mike's surly manner. He turned and went back up the ramp to continue their way down the canal. Sarah dipped a pail of oats and dumped it into Minnie's feed bin. She patted her on the nose as she moved back to get Molly's food. Don't you girls worry. Pa won't let Mike hurt you. she comforted them. Mike stood at the open door of his room and watched her. He took a drink from the bottle on a table just inside his room. "You are nothing but trouble, Missy. I'm going to take care of you and that mule before I am done." Minnie felt a shiver of fear race down her spine. "He scares me. He really hates Sarah and me." She watched him until he turned and went back into his room. Up on deck, Sarah carried a basket of vegetables her mother had just asked her to peel for their evening meal, and sat down on a stool next to her father. She loved the smell of his pipe, and he always told her stories about the places they passed on the canal. "Jack says it's supposed to be so hot in New York City that rich people who can afford it leave the city every summer and don't go back until sometime in September. Is that true?" He nodded. "It is a little early in the season yet, but I think we will meet some of the packet boats as we near Albany. Where is your mother?" "She is baking an apple pie for supper." Sarah started snapping the crisp green beans they had purchased in Herkimer. "Pa, Jack says that General Herkimer, you know, the man who the village is named after, haunts that cemetery we went by near Oriskany." "That is just a story, isn't it?" Her father grinned. "There is such a story. It is told by some old-timers, but I have yet to see his ghost. Some of the area around Skullhairy Creek near there was called Palatine Bridge by the old-time canalers. Did Jack tell you about the Palatine Bridge fairies?" "Fairies? You are telling me another story, right?" She smiled as she looked up at him. "Well, tales are part fact and part fiction, I guess. Canalers who have sailed the canal for years will tell you that the Palatine fairies have helped them find game when they needed food. They would appear and point out game, and when the hungry hunters tried to thank them, they would disappear." "What did they look like? Did they have little wings on their shoulders and long swishy dresses?" Sarah laughed. Her father chuckled. "I never saw one of them myself, so I don't know." He took one of the beans from her basket and chewed it thoughtfully. "As far as General Herkimer goes, he did lose his leg in the Battle of Oriskany when he and his men were battling to save Fort Stanwix in Rome from the Iroquois Indians and the English soldiers who tried to take it from them after our country declared independence back in 1776. He winked at her. "So who knows? Maybe he stayed to haunt the place where he was wounded." "The English people didn't like us?" Sarah was surprised. "But we are part English, aren't we?" "Yes," her father agreed. "My ancestors came over from England. Your mother's immigrated from Ireland. A lot of her family helped to build this canal. Those early years were hard. Everyone who came over to this country knew that this part of New York was important land to own. The waterway from New York City west to what we call Buffalo now, and beyond to the Great Lakes, was hard fought for. Water travel was the best way to head west, and this was the most direct route." "But you just said the English people didn't like us." Sarah frowned. "You have to understand that the only Native Americans are really the Indians. They were here when explorers landed in the United States. While everyone was trying to claim land for their own countries, they fought among themselves. The Iroquois Indians who lived in this state became friendly with the English settlers. When some settlers decided they wanted to be independent and form their own country, the Iroquois Indians sided with the English, who were still loyal to the crown. Some of the Indians, the Algonquins, and other members of the Oneida Nation of Indians, were friendly with the French settlers who were loyal to France. They fought with them. You were studying that in school, isn't that right? We have studied that a little, she admitted, but I have never really understood it. I just thought everyone in this country is American. I never thought about us coming from a lot of different places. Her father laughed again. There are more different nationalities here than in any other country, I think. Remember, while our ancestors are English and Irish, many of the settlers who came to live in the village that is now Frankfurt came from Germany. Frankfurt was once known as German Flats. Did you know that? Sarah nodded. Yes, my teacher read about that when we read about the Battle of Fort Stanwix in Rome, when they flew our flag for the first time. General Herkimer marched from Herkimer to German Flats to help. Exactly. He ran his fingers through his dark hair. We are a mixed lot. And that is all for today's story time. Thank you for joining us. We hope that you join us tomorrow night for Chapter 6 of Minnie the Mule.